Paragraph 9 is the relocation program. If you're working with someone that's doing a relo, make sure that you fill in this section. You're going to know that ahead of time. It's normally not dropped on you at the end. So if they're working with a company, they're going to tell you, and there may be a referral fee or some sort of monetary deduction that you may find because they're working with a relocation company. Paragraph 10, types of real estate representation, disclosures, and informed consent. Now we have really, of course you have seller representation, buyer representation, but we always seem to get fooled for some reason on designated representation and dual representation, right? The reason why I know we get fooled is because people don't like to check these boxes. So designated representation, right? I'm going to work with a buyer and I'm talking to them about designated representation, which means I represent you. However, there's 700 million Samson agents out there that may have a listing that we may go look at. Is it okay if we look at listings that are from Samson, which would put us in a designated representation scenario? Of course, right? Yes, right? Then dual representation means, hey, I am your buyer agent, but hey, I get a listing, and that listing, you may be interested in my listing. Is it okay if I represent you and the buyer, you and the seller at the same time? Well, some people do that, some people don't. Me personally, I never engage in dual representation, never. Even when I've had clients that have been buyer clients that have decided to write on my listing, I've either farmed them to someone else so they get full representation, or they have decided to cancel their brokerage agreement and come in unrepresented. So, but me personally, I never do dual representation, so every agreement that I do, I check the box, does not consent, right, to dual representation. Now what happens if I decide, my buyer says, Steve, I want you to represent me. I have a listing, my seller says, I'm okay with dual representation. I can always do the brokerage relationship addendum, changing this in my brokerage agreement to allow me to do dual agency if all parties agree. Make sure you're in compliance with fair housing. 12 goes into buyer default. The main thing in here that I want to make sure that you understand is the broker's duties under termination. In the event broker terminates agreement prior to the expiration of the agreement, the broker will promptly deliver to the buyer copies of all contracts and other instruments entered into on behalf of the buyer. Broker may retain copies of such contracts and instruments for their own records. So make sure if there is a termination and there's forms or whatever that haven't been received back to the buyer, you are supposed to provide those back to the buyer. Paragraph 13 is attorney's fees. It always comes up when this paragraph only comes up when you get into problems in your contract. The buyer may say, hey, whatever, who pays for these? Does Samson have an in-house attorney or counsel that I can confer with? The answer is no, we don't. If the buyer gets into a position where they need legal representation, we do have a list of recommended attorneys that we can offer out to them. However, that is outside of the terms of this contract. Number 14, make sure you note whether or not they are an active or inactive real estate licensee. Definition just goes into a bunch of different definitions, a couple definitions in regards to agency relationship and brokerage relationship. And then paragraph 12 is the big disclaimer clause in regards to, hey, we're not tax attorneys, we're not home inspectors, we're none of those. So make sure that you hire the appropriate professionals. We can give recommendations, but we're not these people. There's a Megan Law disclaimer. Wire fraud, there's one in here. There's also the single wire fraud sheet that we require to be signed by our clients as well. And then service referrals, just because we're giving a client a referral doesn't mean that we're getting, we're just giving them a referral based on they do good work or they have good prices or whatever. If you are getting money from those referrals, you're supposed to disclose that fact. 17 is miscellaneous. And then 18 is the other provision paragraph, which I was talking about earlier. If you have a fee that you're charging as a team fee or something like that that you want to write in here, you could do that in here. The last paragraph is the paragraph for signatures and the agent contact information. Please put your own contact information in here. I get a lot of these that have my name in there, and I don't really want to be your buyer's contact information. So put your information in there, and then the broker underneath their information. Once again, please don't use my cell phone. Please put the office number in there.